everyone. Welcome to Getting Your Money's Worth, the show that focuses on value. I'm Judith West, and our guest today is Dr. Marianne Legato, author of Why Men Never Remember and Women Never Forget. Hello, Marianne. Thanks for being on the show. And I'm dying to know, I've been asking myself that question for more years than I care to state. Why men never remember and women never forget.
Well, I wrote the book to point out the differences between men and women's brains. They are different structurally and functionally.
Okay, let's stop for 1 second. You are a cardiologist,
yes,
correct? That itself is unusual specialty for a woman, is it not?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, what made you go into the heart?
I've always been interested in it since medical school.
Yeah, and then it's interesting, and then from the heart you went to the brain.
Well, actually,
how did that transition happen?
I really studied women's heart disease before anybody else thought it was popular in the early 1990s.
Or even possible.
Right, or even possible.
Right.
And this expanded into a sort of global approach to women's health and the unique characteristics of it. And I thought, gosh, if the hearts are so different, I wonder about other organ systems. And at Columbia, we founded the whole science of what's called gender-specific medicine, which studies the differences between men and women and enumerates the unique characteristics of our organ systems, among them the brain, not surprisingly.
Okay, well, I want to get to that, but you mentioned something that I can't let go by. Gender-specific medicine.
Yes.
We are now in a world in the 21st century where a lot of emphasis is, in fact, there's much focus on de-emphasizing gender differences.
Well, I think that genders are not identical. Men and women are not identical, nor are they absolutely interchangeable. There are distinct characteristics for each.
There will always be distinct characteristics, biologically,
so. Yes,
pathologically.
Hardwired in, if you will.
Hardwired.
Yes.
Okay. So men and women are hardwired differently.
Yes.
Okay. It starts with, and it goes to the brain. Are men smarter than women?
No. It has nothing to do with intelligence. It has to do with abilities. And men and women in general, tested in the aggregate, have different abilities. Women are more verbal. They develop more quickly. Little boys are 6 weeks behind their sisters at the time of birth in terms of developmental characteristics. And we are much more prone to remembering every detail, particularly of unpleasant experiences such as an argument.
Right.
Because of a combination of our genes and our hormones.
Okay. So what is it, in today's world where there's so many two-income families, this comes into play much more than it ever used to.
Yes, indeed.
Before when it was kind of a focus on you had your job and a woman and mother had her job, this business of being wired differently wasn't on the surface as much as it is today. But it comes in two-income families, it plays a distinctly big role.
Yes, it does. I think we have to factor in the impact of experience on the brain and how we learn to do different things. And men and women are definitely exchanging jobs, have similar responsibilities now. Men become house husbands in many respects, and other women go into the marketplace, like yourself, and develop spectacular careers.
Are roles of mommies and daddies interchangeable, Marianne?
To a degree, I think they are. There are now data that show that men who stay at home and mother or father, I should say, their offspring, do so differently than women, but do a very good job. They're much more likely to pull out the toolkit and say, let's go and figure out what's wrong with the car and change a tire than they are to bake fudge. But they still have a direct impact on and an affection for parenting.
You know what we're dealing with today in the world so much are kids being reared by a single parent, and most often it is the mother and not the father. That makes a big difference in a kid in how a kid grows up.
I think that's right, especially little girls who get their idea of what men are like from their dads.
And they don't have that.
And they don't have
And what about the boys that don't have a role model?
Exactly. I think it's important to find substitutes.
Yeah.
I used to talk about this in medical school with my professors about the importance of having male and female role models, and you can find them.
Oh yeah, we've had on this show, and I've been doing education reform for a long time, trying to help improve the education system, and there are more and more instances where other men and women are becoming mentors to kids through the
Very
school,
important.
and it's very important. I read this book, and I have to say I learned some things. I really did, so I want to thank for that. But you know, the business of how men and women, husbands and wives, or men and women in relation, argue and how they settle their arguments. I thought that was a very key point. Arguments start. Why do arguments start in a relationship?
Well, I think they're normal. I think that people see things differently, have different goals, different approaches to things, and quarrels are not necessarily lethal. They can lead to learning and accommodation. Women, however, tend to remember every detail of an unpleasant experience because their estrogen lights up a wide field of brain cells or neurons in the brain.
And is that part of this? Women never forget?
Exactly. Unfortunately, many women will drag up every single detail of any past injury or offense and kind of globalize the argument, which I learned about from my son. And once I said to him, you know, you never keep your dates with me. He said, Mom, you know what? You globalize. I didn't have dinner with you last night. That doesn't mean I never have dinner with you. And I thought that was a good lesson.
Yeah, it's almost like saying, how come you never call when somebody finally calls?
Exactly.
But there was
good way to forestall other calls.
Good way to forestall other calls is right. But there was something else you said, too, that I thought was very good. When you are in the heat of a discussion and stay to the topic.
Yes.
And don't,
stay on point.
Stay on point.
Right.
And don't raise every issue. I like the way you just said, and just stop talking.
Yeah, I think we tend to overtalk, reiterate the same thing again and again, use too many words. You have to make your point in simple, clear tones. Give your adversary a possible solution, by the way. That's also very important.
Right.
And then
I love the way you told a little anecdote about how you learned that. You learned that yourself through having had a pain medication or something.
Oh, that was funny.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I think anxiety and fear of abandonment is very close to the surface in both men and women. But women in quarrels are very, very anxious often. And I once had taken a tranquilizer for some other reason. I think I'd had a tooth pulled or something. And I found I was much more effective and to the point and brief.
Yeah, and then you went to bed and went to sleep. Well, you know, I have a very bad habit. I suppose it's part of this woman never forgetting. I wake up in the morning and, you know, my husband might say, "Good morning, how are you?" and go to kiss me, and I'm still, you know, frosty and all bent out of shape.
He's forgotten.
And he doesn't, and he says, "What is the matter with you?" He has no notion. And I think to myself, what is the matter with him? What planet is he on that he doesn't understand that it's not out of my system yet?
When women have an unpleasant experience, like a good quarrel, they prompt the secretion of the stress hormone cortisol, which stays up for 24 hours, at least.
Oh, 24 hours, so now I know.
Hours. Right. So the quarrel and its aftermath is much more real for women. Cortisol can impair learning ability and can make people very anxious if it goes on for a long time. A man who has a quarrel has a shot of cortisone that lasts for about an hour, makes him feel terrific. He then forgets the whole thing ever happened, goes to sleep, and he's ready for a whole new life.
Right, he's ready. He's ready to go to bed and make love.
Why are you so?
I'm all like, you know, bed up, curled up in my little 10 inches of bed.
That's right. So you have to let things go.
So, yeah, I have to let things go. Having said that men are hardwired differently, they're built differently, and women are built differently, how can both sexes use this to really make for a more harmonious relationship?
Well, you know, one of the best examples was at West Point. 30 years ago, they began to accept women. And General Joe Franklin, to whom I've spoken, who was the commandant at that time, said that he used the best qualities of both sexes. Women were team players, they were empathetic, they were concerned about every aspect of their charges' lives. Men were to the point, let's get it done. They go from A to Z in a linear fashion, and he said that blending the qualities of both made a better leader, in his opinion. So, having gone to school with men and work mainly with men even now, I think we can learn a great deal from each other.
Right, exactly. And we've just gone through a political campaign that's shown us. But look what happened. It was,
Well, it was an exciting campaign.
And it was the same kind of traditional male-female.
Well, I think there was a lot of gender noise in that campaign.
Right. Yeah. Does any
She's a smart lady, though.
She's a very smart lady, and I have to say I give her a lot of credit. Does any of these biological...
The lady and the dreamer.
Right. Do any of these biological differences that we've talked about, these hardwired differences, I don't want to go without mentioning why men die first. How to lengthen your life. What is the relationship between what we've just discussed and longevity in men?
Well,
Marianne?
I think this is a very important book, Why Men Die First. Men are inherently more vulnerable than we are in many respects. Very much fewer male embryos make it from the womb compared to girls. When they're born, they're much less sturdy. If they're born premature, boys are much less sturdy
when they're born.
Yeah, their immune systems, even as adults, are less vigorous than women's. And they have a terrible time with suicide and violence.
Really?
Until about the age of 45. This is the second most common cause of death.
Are they more depressed than women?
That's a wonderful question. Everyone says women are twice as often depressed as men. I believe we just don't recognize the signs in men. Don't you think that's true?
I think that's absolutely true.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of quiet and very sad men.
Very sad men. And I say, and the more I've gotten into the business world, I've been working for years, and the more I'm involved in some of these, I can see why a lot of men come home very sad. They may try to hide it, but lots of what you go through in life during the day is very sad.
Shut up and keep moving. Right? No, not complain.
So, before we run out of time, I love your books. I think what you do is very interesting. But I want to say, I want to leave our listenership with a couple of things that both men and women can do. We've talked about it, to really be more sympathetic to each other.
I think you have to understand that if a man's quarrel is over before you are finished with it, that does not mean he doesn't love you. It's just a difference in approach. There was a wonderful movie with Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward in which they're standing in a bank vault, and he's going over all of the family's resources and telling her what to do in case he dies first, da-da-da-da. And she looks up and she says, "Do you love me?" And he looks up at her and he said, "Would I be here if I didn't?" Would I be here if I didn't?
Right, exactly. And I think that's very. And I think we kind of forget that.
Yeah. Right. So I think they're more loving than we know.
That we know. Right, exactly. Why men never remember and women never forget. Right. Thank you so much for being on the show.
It's been fun to be here.
Very good topic. It was a very good topic. You've watched Getting Your Money's Worth I'm Judith West, and for more, please watch my website, gettingyourmoneysworthnyc.com. Thanks for watching.